Welcome back to yet another episode of On the Grid Podcast, Season 5, Episode 19 today. We are reviewing the Spanish Grand Prix, which didn't happen last weekend. It happened the week beforehand, but we had a few things that we had to sort out before then, so we are recording it now instead of last week. And we'll be previewing the Canadian Grand Prix, which is this weekend. I'm your host, Adrian Kita. I'd say joining me as ever is my co-host Ethan Evans, but it's not Ethan Evans. Joining me today, the co-host for today, is actually our editor. Well, you can say special guest, but I'm calling him a co-host for today. It's Brad Smith, our editor. Brad, how are you? We've not spoken to you in a while. How are things? How have you found the new season? And how are things? How are you doing?
Life's getting on. I'm making my annual appearance. I think I've made, since I've been editing this podcast, I've made one appearance every season. This is my annual appearance. 2025, I think it's a decent season. There's a lot of stuff in there that I like. I mean, as a self-proclaimed Williams fan, we good this year, finally. But what can I say?
I mean, for Williams especially, it's been a fantastic season. Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon. I mean, more Alex Albon. And let's actually touch upon Williams because I don't think, because me and Ethan are self-proclaimed Ferrari fans now, Ethan turned into the dark side because of Lewis Hamilton and me obviously being a Ferrari fan through and through. We don't really talk about other teams, but let's touch upon Williams. How have you found 2025 for Williams, especially Alex Albon? He's been flying from the start of the season. Carlos Sainz less so, but I think he's starting to get to grips with the car finally. How have you made the season so far? There's been challenges, there's been fantastic races in there as well, but I mean it's Williams are certainly a team on the up, and they're not stopping anytime soon.
Yeah, it all sort of folds back into this plan that James Vowles is going on about. It's like we don't really care about 24, we don't really care about 25. We're just going to rebuild everything, and it's one of the only times where you can say honestly, the rebuild's kind of working. You know, it's because they're not sort of glued to the bottom two or three on the leaderboard. They're actually going places. They have more than like two or three good races a year. So it's just one of those things. They're really getting into the midfield now, and it is something you like to see. With mixing it up with other teams, especially not just like back markers, but they're actually getting on with it. Like Alpine on a good day, or anybody else. They can be leaders of the midfield on a good day, which is what we like to see. You know.
Especially Williams that have got a lot of heritage behind them from winning championships and winning constructors championships. I think Williams are a
Yeah.
team that are slowly building their way up. But let's jump into qualifying and let's look at Q1. In Q1, knocked out, it was Nico Hulkenberg, Esteban Ocon, Carlos Sainz, Franco Colapinto, who stopped in the pit lane, which caused an absolute kerfuffle, can I say, at the end of Q1. His car stopped. Then it started working, and then he just rolled it slightly out of the pit lane and then to the side of a track. Completely bamboozled me. And then rounding off the bottom five was Yuki Tsunoda. I don't think we need to talk about. Well, we could touch upon Carlos Sainz soon, but let's talk about the main talking point. Yuki Tsunoda, once again, out in Q1. And the obvious question, how do you think he's going to respond to the added pressure of him getting knocked out of Q1? Because it's in my memory, I think it's the next in a couple of races that Yuki Tsunoda has been knocked out in Q1. Especially as a 20th qualifier. We've seen Liam Lawson do that for two sessions in a row in Shanghai, and we saw what happened there. But there seems to be added pressure on Yuki Tsunoda, especially with him being in the sport for so long, jumping into the Red Bull team, looking like he's going to be the only driver that is able to match Max Verstappen. I don't think anybody on the grid could match Max Verstappen in that Red Bull car. But Yuki Tsunoda once again has fallen foul of a Q1 exit.
Yeah, it's never great, especially when you have such a force of a teammate, especially. But to be honest, I think first things first, we need to apologize to Sergio Perez, because he was what seems like the only man who could actually, be somewhat near. I mean, shoes on the other foot. Sergio Perez has years worth of experience. Closing on I think about a decade's worth of experience. So he obviously has the time and the knowledge, but I think for Yuki, it really is just about just kind of framing it in that sense of just like, yes, it's another Q1 exit, but you've got to take your small wins where you can get them because surely it can't be good for his like mental psyche, if nothing else. If you just see bad after bad after bad after bad after bad, and they just dog piles on each other. So I think it's just a case of just framing it and then seeing what is the major thing. There's always a major thing. What is the thing that's keeping me from being like it is in the V carb? Is it the car? Can I influence it? Is there anything I can do there? Because he was flying in the V carb. So what's the difference? What's changed? Is it the team members? Is it the car? Something's majorly wrong here.
You could arguably say, to be fair, with Yuki Tsunoda, I think it would be the car because that Red Bull car is so suited to Max Verstappen that we've seen how many drivers fallen foul. We've seen Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon, Sergio Perez to an extent, Yuki Tsunoda, Liam Lawson, Daniel Kvyat, Daniel Ricciardo to an extent as well. It's a couple of well, at least a handful of these drivers have all tried but failed to tame the Red Bull beast that only Max Verstappen can tame. So it looks to be a tricky task.
Just
Let's
before
talk
we move
about
on
yes,
as
go for it.
well, on what I mean by framing, when I say that is that you remember, cast your mind back about 5 years or so ago, right? Lewis Hamilton is the dominant force, literally, whatever. Valtteri Bottas could have been literally had a 10 out of 10 drive, and he was still second to Lewis Hamilton, you
Hmm.
know? And I think that's what I mean by framing it. It's like you will never really beat Verstappen on his day. It's just kind of maxing what you can, and then eventually you'll get better. I think that's what he's got to do, really.
Yeah, I think that will be the key for Yuki Tsunoda. Let's touch upon Carlos Sainz a little bit here in Q1. Um, yeah, it's a little bit of a little bit of a strange one for Carlos Sainz because in recent races, recent weeks, he's been out in Q2 in Monaco, which okay is all right. He had a P6 in Imola, a P6 start. So I think it's a little bit of a strange one to see Carlos Sainz knocked out in Q1. Um, from your perspective, what do you make of Carlos Sainz getting knocked out in Q1? Do you think it was purely down to the Colapinto in a pit lane kind of incident, or do you think it was just not the right setup for Spain, or what can you put a finger on what do you think went wrong with Carlos Sainz in qualifying for the Spanish Grand Prix?
I don't think there is a specific one sort of this is the issue type thing. I think a lot of it contributes. So Spain's always been a pretty bad track for Williams and just as a whole because it's high and mid-speed aero, isn't it? It's a lot of long corners on the tires and that kind of thing. So there is that. Which I think Albon said in an interview going to Spain is like, yeah, we're going to struggle here. And I think that Q1 exit, also with the Colapinto stuff and that kind of thing, I think it ultimately just boils down to margins. You know, obviously the lap wasn't great, and it is that kind of thing where in Q1, Q2, it's the margins to get in there are so razor thin, especially this season, where if you make one mistake, if your tires are a bit cold, you get a little bit of traffic, you're not getting into the next qualifying session. So I think it is just small margins, really.
Okay, moving on to Q2, and the bottom five in that session was Alex Albon, Gabriel Bortoletti, who had a fantastic qualifying in P12. Liam Lawson, Lance Stroll, and Ollie Behrman. Lance Stroll obviously was then withdrawn from the Spanish Grand Prix because of issues with his wrist. And I'm actually going to touch upon this one because why, okay, Lance Stroll is in this seat purely because of money. Okay. He's clearly feeling pain for the last 6 weeks, as it has been reported, but is still driving. And he participates in qualifying, fully well knowing that he's not likely to participate in a race. In your opinion, Brad, would you A, be Lance Stroll and jeopardize points for the team by competing in qualifying and, seeing the second car as Lance Stroll's car is called, getting no points? Or would you B, get yourself Felipe Drugovich or Stoffel Van Dorn into qualifying, and uh, maybe potentially battle for some points? I mean, option A sees the car not being used at all, so there's likely to be less engine wear on the engine. But option B sees either a return of Stoffel Van Dorn or a step up from Felipe Drugovich to show what he's worth. What did you make of the situation, and which option would you have chosen?
I mean, it really depends on kind of what the official line from like the medical staff was and how what kind of Lance is like because well, what does everybody say? Racing drivers are inherently selfish. So if I was Lance, I would be like, no, I'm driving. I am the great I am. I want to do this kind of thing. But from the team's perspective, if they were at least aware of like, hey, there's this issue coming up, his wrist might not be 100%, especially with their point situation, if I was the team principal, I would have said, no, Lance, just take it out, take yourself out of the thing, take it out, just have a rest for a couple of weeks, save your rest for your home Grand Prix in Canada, next time coming up, which we'll get onto later. Take it, just let's get Felipe in or something like that, or Valtteri or whoever. So I can see it from both sides, but if I was team principal, I would say get a reserve driver in, specifically just for points, really.
I mean, it would have been a smart choice from Aston Martin, but inevitably they did not do that. They
No, I mean,
chose something else.
we all know who the owner is,
Yeah,
so
exactly. That's
but
that's the whole point. Lance will drive no matter what. But like I mentioned, he inevitably withdrew himself from a Spanish Grand Prix, so he didn't actually run at all. Let's touch upon Gabriel Bortoleto because Gabriel Bortoleto has, he has some highs, he has some lows. But I think in qualifying, he certainly hit a bit of a high here in Spain. Qualifying, I believe a career high P12, if I'm not mistaken. Because he's made a few Q2 appearances now, and I think he's been on the fringes a couple of times. Obviously, still yet to score a point in Formula One, Gabriel Bortoleto. But Brad, what have you made of the Brazilian's kind of progress in qualifying? Whether he's able to transfer it into a race sometime soon?
yeah, I think it's one of those things we have to say. And I'm sorry, Gabrielle, I was unaware of your game. Like it really is one of those things that just shows. Obviously, there is some spark, fire, element, whatever you want to say, of performance there. It's just a case of let's not be around the bush here. He's still a rookie. He still needs to just build himself up. He's not obviously the de facto superstar like someone like an Oscar Piastri or something like that is, but he just needs to build himself up to be like a midfield maestro kind of person. And then, but also, as we'll go on later with the race, I think this is more of a sign of the car, the Sauber, in and of itself, just taking that step forward because it's not, as we've previously seen, welded to the bottom of the table. So, a little bit of both, I would think.
Yeah, certainly a lot of positives in the race for Sauber, which we will talk about later on. But let's move on to Q3. And it was Oscar Piastri that clinched pole position ahead of Lando Norris and Max Verstappen. I think those three were the favourites for pole position. The pole switched hands a couple of times, but Oscar Piastri secured it with George Russell in fourth and Lewis Hamilton in fifth. We've rarely, I mean, we speak about Lewis Hamilton on this podcast a lot purely because of Ethan and his love for Lewis Hamilton. But we've not really spoken highly and positively about him. But in Spain, in qualifying, he looked very good. He looked to be the quicker of the two Ferraris. That all of that being said, Leclerc didn't have a second run in Q3 in Spain, but Hamilton, sort of showed what he's capable of, and he showed that he's still sort of got that mojo in him.
Yeah, there's still elements of the Hamilton we once knew. I say like he's like he's going away or something, but it's becoming a bit of a trend, and I'm not entirely enthusiastic about it. Where Hamilton he has a great result in a session, let's say qualifying or practice three or whatever, and then he goes, yes, there is great potential for the weekend. Podiums are coming, lads, and then nothing happens. So I want to say don't get me wrong, qualifying performance was great. P5, where it should be, but I just want to just shake him or something. Just say, what is happening? Why is it? What is going on at Ferrari? Because it just seems to be either they're there or just like completely off the pace. Normally, with Hamilton, he rolls a one and it's completely off the pace. I don't understand.
Yeah, very frustrating for Lewis Hamilton. But rounding off Q3 was Kimi Antonelli in sixth, Charles Leclerc in seventh with Pierre Gasly in eighth, Isaac Hadjar in ninth, and Fernando Alonso getting himself through to Q3 and finishing in 10th. Like I mentioned, Lance Stroll withdrew from the Grand Prix, so everybody from 14th downwards was bumped up one place. So we saw Behrman start 14th. We saw the likes of Nico Hulkenberg 15th, Esteban Ocon started 16th, Sainz 17th, Colapinto 18th, and then Yuki Tsunoda would have started 19th, but he had his car components changed, so therefore he started from a pit lane. But let's go on to our average driver ratings and start off with Oscar Piastri, who pretty much held his own, was out in front for pretty much the whole time, apart from when Max Verstappen decided to stay out and overcut and hit and hope for the best. And yeah, qualified first, finished first. It's a 10 out of 10. It's nothing more from a championship leader. It's just quality upon quality from Oscar Piastri.
Yeah, same here. It's a 10 out of 10 from me. I don't think there's much more he could have done in that race. It's another race where he's on the podium. He's just collecting those points. And I don't want to call it too early, but he's definitely sort of making a good case for the championship this year, surely.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that one. Moving on to Lando Norris, who qualified second and finished second behind his teammate. I mean, the safety car certainly threw a little bit of a curveball for the two McLarens, but I think it was always going to be Oscar that was going to take the race win. I think Lando Norris, was sort of occupied by Max Verstappen and was gunning to overtake him, and he did overtake him as he was on the soft and Max was on the hard tyre. I've gone with a 9 out of 10. I think it's always we've done it on the podcast every single time. Whichever teammate finishes higher gets one grade more. And Lando Norris, unfortunately, is on the receiving end of a 9 out of 10 and not a 10 out of 10. So for me, he had a fantastic race, great second place finish for him. Still, obviously, keeps himself in the championship battle, very much so. But didn't have that cutting edge, that striking ability to overtake Oscar Piastri and get himself another victory under his belt. So for me, it's a 9 out of 10.
For me, I've maybe gone a touch harsh. I've gone a slightly lower than that. It's just an 8.5 out of 10. And the reason being purely just for peak Lando at this point. Got a poor start, recovered it in the end, but really he wasn't, Piastri was faster anyway, but he really was just kind of competing for second at that point. So I've been a bit harsh, but I think ultimately it is the right thing.
On to Charles Leclerc, who qualified in seventh after not having a second run in Q3, but finished a fantastic third. For me, clear as day, 10 out of 10. I mean, there's a couple of 10 out of 10s in this race, but for Charles Leclerc to start seventh and finish on the podium, for me as a Leclerc fan, it was brilliant to watch. The move on from Max Verstappen, tad bit naughty. Surprised he didn't get a penalty for that and for what he did to George Russell. But all in all, Leclerc finished on the podium. Happy days. 10 out of 10.
Yeah. I've gone with a 9 out of 10. Purely just for the reason that it was kind of a kind of both kind of thing. I think this is the first time, to the best of my knowledge, in a few years that Ferrari strategy has actually gone well. Because obviously because he had an extra set of softs at the end, so he just bolted on the softs, got right the way past through the safety car period. But no, it was a great drive by Leclerc. He got on the podium, which wasn't really on the cards at the beginning of the race. So a 9 out of 10, but I think ultimately, had he been on the pace a little bit more, he would have been nailed on for that podium to begin with, rather than having to do with the safety car period, that kind of thing. So it's a 9 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, to be fair, I think Ferrari's strategy this year has been pretty much bob on. There's been the odd race that has been off, but I think this season certainly the strategy has definitely improved and it's definitely helped Ferrari along the way. Moving on to George Russell, who qualified in fourth and finished fourth. For me, because I've gone with a 10 for Leclerc, I've gone for a 9 for Russell, purely on the basis that, he was a little bit off the pace. Had obviously that battle with Max Verstappen, saw himself get crashed into, but he wasn't really challenging the top three, especially when they sort of drove away and him and Max kind of locked horns. But still, a very, very good race. Just didn't have enough to be challenging for the podium.
Yeah, for me, I've kind of gone with the same logic as you. Is kind of, if Leclerc is on a step higher, then you've got to give Russell the kind of the point lower. I've gone with an 8 purely just for obviously that reason. But then the justification for me is more the Mercedes as a whole and Russell kind of just felt like a distant second to the front runners. If that makes sense, they were behind the front runners all weekend. And, there was obviously that bit with Verstappen, that kind of thing. But, Drive to Survive is eating good this year. But yeah, there is that whole thing. So he got the result in the end, but very so scrappy. So that's why it's an 8 from me.
On to Nico Hulkenberg, who, if I could give an 100 out of 10, I would. But he qualified 16th, started 15th, finished fifth, ahead of Lewis Hamilton, who I'll talk a little bit about him in a few moments. But finished fifth. It's the clearest of 10 out of 10s ever. Nico Hulkenberg, that Sauber was on a complete charge. Safety car helped them massively. The penalty to Max Verstappen helped him massively. And he's finished in the top five. His highest ever finish since his Renault days, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, oozes class. Fantastic race for Nico Hulkenberg, and it shows that maybe this could be an off race for Kick Sauber, but they certainly do have one race wonders in their repertoire, and the Spanish Grand Prix was certainly that for Nico Hulkenberg.
Yeah, I mean, I've gone with you. The most obvious 10 out of 10 in history. I think, for Sauber especially, performances like this is why they hired Nico Hulkenberg. You know, Akeem just absolutely on his day, just goes with it, takes the ball and run. I like you, I'm a bit kind of weary. Is this a one-off? Is this, something? But I'm a little optimistic because obviously there was that points run at the end of last year. There's obviously a little pickup in form this year, so we might see something come in, but I think this is really the peak in terms of, unless there is some utter chaos, I think really this is the best kind of result we'll see this year. But what a result, honestly. So yeah, solid 10 out of 10 for me.
On to Lewis Hamilton, who qualified fifth and finished sixth. Can I just say, Ferrari gave him an absolute blinding strategy in the first stint. He drove fantastically in the first stint, and in the second stint, the wheels completely fell off. That Ferrari may as well have had no wheels on it at all. He was just nowhere to be seen. He was just falling like a stone. Initially, I gave him an eight. I'm dropping it down to a seven. I just think, Lewis Hamilton, from the hype and the expectation that he put himself in qualifying, to then just being absolutely nowhere because of that second stint, finishing behind a Sauber. It's in a sense it's a little bit humiliating, especially with Sauber's reputation of arguably being the slowest car on the grid this season, in most of the races. Um, but yeah, for Lewis Hamilton, definitely qualifying to remember. His first good qualifying for Ferrari in a long time, but certainly a race to forget after the last stint that completely fell away from him.
Yeah, it's not looking great for Hamilton really, especially given obviously all the speculation and the hype and everything. I've gone with 7 out of 10. It's the qualifying was good. And that's what I was saying earlier. The qualifying was where we kind of expected it to be, but then it just kind of got worse from there. And then obviously he surrendered the spot to Charles Leclerc, and then had a slow stop as well, and just being overtaken by Hulkenberg. It just kind of just dogpiled on top of each other, and it was just, uh, that's really kind of describes my attitude towards Hamilton. I mean, just, oh no, I want to see him better, but yeesh.
There's obviously got to be bad times until you see the good times, and I think Lewis Hamilton is going through the motions at the moment at Ferrari. Moving on to seventh place, Isaac Hadjar, who started in ninth and like I mentioned, finished in seventh. Solid 9 out of 10 from me. Great performance for the V Carb once again for Isaac Hadjar, showing that he's the stronger of the two V Carb drivers, even though Liam Lawson is the more experienced driver in the team. But Isaac Hadjar, from a rookie that was sort of written off at the start of a season, especially with him being the last one that was announced on the Formula One grid for this season, a lot of people wrote him off. But he's certainly proven those doubters wrong, and he's shown his potential, he's shown his worth, he's shown his talent. And it's consistent performance after consistent performance and more points for VCarb. So all positives in the Isaac Hadjar camp, and it's another very, very good performance from him.
Yeah, I mean, I think just collectively, F1 media is running out of superlatives to talk about Isaac Hadjar. Because like you said, it was very start of the year, just get out of this guy. Like he's not gonna be in there for that long, and he's just completely smashed it out of the park. Just he's just got better, and I think, given what we know about Red Bull, is they might come knocking at some point. But for now, it is a 9 out of 10 from me for this race because it was a great drive. Obviously, the penalty and Antonio's DNF got to make kind of a bit more far up the points to seventh, but he was definitely deserving of points today, and it's another good performance.
Well, let's not jinx Isaac Hadjar to say that he's going to jump into the Red Bull C, because jinxing him like that will probably give him some sort of PTSD or flashbacks of what has happened with Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson,
Oh,
who is his
oh, don't get
current,
me
current
wrong.
teammate.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I would say Red Bull comes knocking, but if I was as a Hadjar, I'd say no. Given current form, I'd say uh-uh.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I would say, I'd certainly close the door and be like, yeah, Helmut Marko, your second car is awful. Just leave me alone. On to P8 man Pierre Gasly, who qualified eighth, finished eighth. And I think for Alpine, it's once in a blue moon that we see a performance like this, because we saw a retirement in Monaco, and then in Imola, he was sort of on the fringes of the points, but this time he made it in the points quite comfortably. And it's another 9 out of 10, but I found it out. Very good drive from Pierre Gasly, much needed points for Alpine. I think, after qualifying into Q3, the expectation was high for Alpine that they're going to be getting a good result at Spain. And they certainly delivered it in Barcelona with a P8 finish. So very good performance. And another driver that kind of has taken it into his stride in Barcelona and delivered with a points finish.
Once again, Pierre Gasly proving that pretty much he is the only good thing happening at Alpine right now. Call that a hot take, call that whatever it is. It's an 8 out of 10 for me. It was a very good performance. And more points on the board is exactly what Alpine needs at this point. But yeah, no, great drive from Gasly.
And on to Fernando Alonso, who qualified in 10th and finished ninth. It's another 9 out of 10 from me. It's another fantastic performance, and it's Fernando Alonso's first points of the season. That duck is finally broken. After so many races this year, he's finally scored his first point since Abu Dhabi last year. And hopefully the points sort of keep on coming and keep on rolling through the door for Fernando Alonso now because he's broken that duck, and hopefully he can get those points in and kind of overtake Lance Stroll in the drivers' championship because it is rather embarrassing knowing that your daddy's cash teammate who realistically shouldn't be in the seat is higher than you in the championship. But for me, Fernando Alonso, fantastic drive, got himself into the points. It's lucky that sort of in a sense Antonelli and Verstappen got that retirement and penalty respectively. But you've got to be in it to win it, and you've got to be there at the right time to strike. So Fernando Alonso was there, and he was able to pounce on the opportunity. So very good drive, and a very, very well deserved points finish finally.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a 9 out of 10 for me. Again, just kind of echoing your points, really. Just, finally, the most unluckiest man in F1 has a bit of luck. He's got his points. It didn't look like it at one point, obviously, because he was near the back. He was kind of driving in Carlos Sainz for 16th at his home Grand Prix. But then he got on new tyres and got in the top 10, even before the penalty. So he got there in the end, and he didn't get any bad luck, which is all that matters.
And rounding off the points finishes was Max Verstappen, the kind of villain from Barcelona. Qualified third, finished 10th. He was running, I think he finished just behind George Russell in fifth. But that 10-second time penalty after running into the side of George Russell saw his top five finish in Spain evaporate, and he was relegated down to 10th. For me, I've given him a 6, and I think that might actually be a little bit lenient. I think he had a fantastic race up until the point of a safety car and him clashing with both Charles Leclerc and George Russell. Should have, realistically, if I was the FIA, I'd probably give him a race ban for what he did. Or I'd at least shown him the black flag and disqualified him because what he did was certainly uncalled for and certainly very, very sour and very bitter. But apart from that, his race was very good. He was running inside the top five pretty much throughout the whole of the race. Um, I think he was on the three stop strategy if I'm not mistaken as well. So he was doing everything he could to maximize his result, but in the end, he showed signs of a very, very sore loser and not a proper race driver. So I've given him a 6. It could easily be a 1 for what he did. But I think the race that he ran kind of outweighs the penalty and what he did.
Yeah, it wasn't great, but it's a 4 from me for Verstappen. Because my reasoning is for like what 80-90% of that race. Again, Verstappen proved that on his day he is one of the best drivers out there. But you cannot escape that what he did. For me, it's something you see in iRacing, really. Something like that where he just got completely bitter and he just completely lost his head. And the fact he only got a 10-second penalty and 3 penalty points, pretty lucky with that. I mean, yes, he is only now 1 point away from a race ban, but that only lasts until Austria. So I think the FIA could have easily given him more, but yeah, it's a 4 out of 10 for me. Not a good race.
Touching upon Max Verstappen a little bit more, what he did, like we mentioned, the 10-second time penalty probably does not warrant because you think intentional corner cutting at Monaco from George Russell saw him get a drive-through penalty, which is about 20 to 25 seconds. And Max Verstappen, for intentionally ramming it into a driver, got himself a 10-second time penalty. So, it bamboozles me a little bit with the FIA sometimes, but rules are the rules and they implement them, we don't. Moving on to Liam Lawson, who finished 11th after qualifying in 13th. Solid 7 out of 10 from me. Good performance from Liam Lawson, kind of battled his way from a back at one point and finished just on the fringes of the points. Not as good as a performance as Isaac Hadjar, but as good as you'll get with Liam Lawson, kind of on the fringes of the points, there or thereabouts. But unfortunately, not picking that elusive point for 10th place. So it's a 7 out of 10. I think he still had a good and a decent enough race.
Yeah, it's kind of the same story from me. It's a decent performance from Liam. But given where Isaac is and what he's kind of been doing, it's you'd like to see him a bit further up. So it's a 7 out of 10 for me. It's kind of standard for what we see now, but really, as the more experienced person in the team, you'd hope he'd be doing a lot better.
On to Gabriel Bortoleto, who qualified in 12th and finished 12th. Very consistent race from Bortoleto. He didn't hit the dizzying heights that Nico Hulkenberg did, finishing fifth. But it still gets a decent grade of an 8 out of 10 for his good race. Very good qualifying, out qualified Hulkenberg, but wasn't able to kind of maintain that momentum and drive forward like Nico Hulkenberg did that saw him finish inside the top 10 and finished firmly in fifth place. Still, for me, it's a very good race. It's a step forward for Gabriel Bortoleto. The only worry and the only issue is it a one-off, like we mentioned, for Nico Hulkenberg, and can Sauber maintain what they had in Spain? I mean, the questions will be answered in Canada, I suppose. But in Spain, it was a good display from Sauber. Just unfortunate that Gabriel Bortoleto couldn't get his first points in Formula One.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. Um, I've gone a touch higher. So I've gone with an 8.5 out of 10. Essentially, just for the reasons that yeah, the car is great. He got P12. If he would have got points, I would consider a 9 or maybe even a 10 considering his rookie status. But at 8.5 is good. He's had a very good performance. His kind of first or second properly good performance in the car. I mean, it's just a shame they didn't get the points in the end. But for me, if I was Bortoleto now, I'd be like, right, that is the standard. I cannot go back down from this. Got to be sub up there now because he can prove he can do it. So he really can't drop the ball the next few races.
On to Yuki Tsunoda, who qualified in 20th, started from the pit lane, finished 13th. For me, it's a good performance from Yuki Tsunoda, getting himself up the order, but I still think it's a 6 out of 10. Very average. I mean, in a Red Bull, you are expected to finish firmly inside the top 10. And Yuki Tsunoda, because he qualified at the back of the grid, was just not able to get that. And, it kind of hampers him every single time. We saw the same with Liam Lawson. He started 20th in Shanghai and got himself up to like 12th or 13th, similar to what Yuki Tsunoda did in Spain. But it's just not good enough from Yuki Tsunoda. Um, you can still say it's a betting in process, 6 races down the line. But it's a matter of time when Red Bull kind of look at the situation and go, enough is enough. And Yuki Tsunoda's time at Red Bull could be numbered. But at the moment, it's a steady race. He's gained a lot of ground on, you know, the cars around him, and he was able to get some overtakes done, but just not good enough. If he finishes inside the top 10, then maybe it's bumped to a 7, maybe an 8 out of 10. But because he's finished a bit outside the points, it's a 6 from me.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. It is a six from me. What would stop it from being worse, is if he didn't get to if he was kind of sort of floundering with those cars behind him. I mean, 13th, it's not great, but it's just considering obviously the strength of Red Bull and where we'll come to, etc. But I think really for Red Bull, especially, I think they just need to get this whole driver replacement thing out of their heads and just back somebody. Pick a horse and stick with it. Because it does nobody's mentality great if they're like, you get 3 races or 5 races or whatever it is. You lay it all out there and that's not doing anybody good. I think they just need to back Sonoda, let him really flourish. Because like 2021, he didn't do very good. 2022, he got better. 2023, he was great. So it just takes time. And I think that's the one thing that he doesn't really have on his side at the minute.
And on to 14th place, Carlos Sainz, qualified 18th, but started 17th, like I mentioned, finished 14th. Again, another driver that kind of had a very mid race. Had a bit of an alternate strategy going onto the softs as well during one of the mid stints. Sort of paid off, but sort of didn't because of the safety car. So yeah, another driver that had a bit of a very average race with a 6.
Yeah. I mean, considering this is the team I back, I've gone a bit harsh. It's a five. It's a five for Science for me. This is his joint lowest result of the season. And yes, Spain is a bit of a bad track, but 14th, he could have pulled something out from somewhere, and it's just underwhelming. Considering it's his home race and all the circumstances that went into it, I pretty underwhelming from Carlos Sainz today.
Yeah, like I was gonna say, his home race, and you see kind of his idol up in the points there in ninth, and he wasn't able to deliver. Franco Colapinto up next, finished in 15th after starting 18th, following the withdrawal of Lance Stroll, and obviously Yuki Tsunoda started from a pit lane. Um, Another 6. I think another driver that had an average weekend. Didn't really bark up any trees and was just very average.
Yeah, it's the same for me, really. It's another five from me. It's a mid as hell weekend. It didn't get off to a great start, obviously with the mechanical issues, and then it never really recovered from there. Um, I mean, Gasly's up in the points, Franco's not doing very well, and it's we're getting to the tail end now of this supposed 5 race deal. So surely a result's got to come out of the bag soon.
I don't think they will, to be fair. I think Colapinto's bound to be in that car for the rest of the season. Flavio Briatore has obviously said it's a five race deal, but I think he's bound to stay in there. I don't think who do you realistically look to replace him, and Mick Schumacher with his obviously with his driving kind of priorities. He's unlikely to do anything. Victor Martins, Kosh Miney, are you going to promote anybody from F2?
I doubt it.
Paul Aaron, reserve driver, are you going to promote him? All of these drivers realistically are unproven. Same with a gamble
Yeah.
for Franco Colapinto. But I just think it's a little bit difficult for whoever goes to step into Jack Doohan, or do you even bring Jack Doohan back? Which one do
Well,
you go for?
this is the thing, and this is what I was saying with Red Bull as well. I think they really just need to pick a lane, pick a driver, stick with it, and go, right, this is our driver for the year. Because I can't imagine it's doing Franco any good. Yes, obviously there's commercial opportunities, but like just for the driver itself, it can't be doing them any good. And Jack, he had what, 4 races, 5 races? Surely he'll be like itching to say, right, I am better than this guy. Just give me the time and I'll be there. So sure, they're going to make their mind up sooner or later.
You'd hope so. That's for sure. Moving on to Esteban Ocon, qualified 17th, but started 16th, finished 16th, another 6 out of 10. after the highs of Monaco, this race was it just wasn't it for Esteban Ocon and the Haas team finishing penultimate and last in the order of race finishes. Yeah, it just wasn't meant to be for Esteban Ocon.
Yeah, it's a five from me. Haas drew the short straw this weekend. They were the ones without pace. Uh, kind of unlikely for them, but there's not really a lot to say. They were never there, couldn't really pull it out of the bag, and that's kind of it.
And rounding off our race finishes, Ollie Behrman, who qualified 15th, started 14th, and finished in 17th. I've gone one lower than Esteban Ocon, so I've gone with a five. Yeah, like we mentioned for Haas, just nowhere to be seen really. Um, the slowest car this weekend, and like we mentioned, really showed a lack of any pedigree that they've got a chance to even move forward. Didn't really trouble anyone, and firmly finished at the bottom of the field in Spain.
Yeah, it's another five from me. Again, Haas had no pace. You could argue the strategy was better with Ocon, so he got ahead. But a very impressive start to Bowman's career. But it's not scored a point since Bahrain, so it's a little touch worrying. But yeah, it's just kind of a mid-race nonetheless from Ollie Behrman.
Yeah, a little bit worrying, but nonetheless, I think Ollie Behrman is a driver that certainly will have a successful career in Formula One. On to our non-race finishes. So Antonelli, I'm going to wrap him off quickly. Antonelli, I gave him a six. He qualified in sixth, but retired. He obviously went into the gravel trap and never recovered. Alex Albon had a collision, I believe it was with Liam Lawson, and had to retire from the race. And then obviously Lance Stroll, after qualifying in 14th, I gave him a 5 out of 10 slap bang in the middle of the road.
Yeah. For me, Antonelli, decent race before obviously the Mercedes engine blew up. It's a six from me. And then for Albon, obviously with the damage at the beginning, there was not a lot to really look at. Qualifying was okay. So it's a solid middle of the road. It's a 5 out of 10 from me.
And Lance Stroll.
Not a lot to say really. He had kind of a decent qualifying for him. It's yeah, I'm gonna have to go middle of the road again. 5 out of 10.
Rounds off our Spain review. Let's look forward to Canada this weekend. Finally back to racing after a week's break. How are you looking forward to the preparations ahead of Canada? What do you think? Who do you think will come out on top, Brad? And what do you think the likelihood of a safety car or some rain to throw in a bit of spicy action will be?
I love the Canadian Grand Prix. It's surely it's one of the classics at this point. In terms of what we're looking out for, it really depends. I mean, I if I was a betting man, I would definitely put a bet on there being a safety car. Obviously, with all the rookies and the very close action on the track, and all this kind of stuff. There's somebody's bound to bury it into the wall of champions. So I would definitely expect a safety car, or at least a little bit of carnage.
Actually, let's. I'll flick back at my predictions for the Spanish Grand Prix before we look forward to the Canadian Grand Prix predictions. So for the Spanish Grand Prix, I correctly predicted Alonso to get points and Piastri to outqualify Lando Norris, with my qualifying predictions of Piastri and Norris in P1 and P2 coming to fruition. I predicted Leclerc and Verstappen to qualify third and fourth, which didn't come through, with Verstappen in third and Russell in fourth. But I correctly predicted Lewis Hamilton to qualify in fifth. And then for the race, I stuck with the same top two with Piastri. And no, I went with Norris over Piastri in the race. It decided to be the same top two. I went with Leclerc in third, which I got correct. Hamilton and then Verstappen in fourth and fifth. With actually, in fact, it was Russell and Hulkenberg who rounded off the top five. Let's now look at our Canadian predictions before we round off the episode with a bit of Formula 2 and Formula 3, as they're not racing this weekend, so we can have a look back at what happened in Spain. Brad, give me your two-star predictions. What are you thinking will happen in the Canadian Grand Prix?
My two-star predictions. So I'm gonna I'm gonna be maybe a touch controversial. I'm gonna say Verstappen finally gets his one race ban. Okay, let me just flesh that out a touch. Because obviously he's on, I think it's 11 penalty points now, and obviously you need 12. You can get one penalty point for a lot of things. So I think there is obviously something to be happened there. My other prediction, um, I'm going to say it's pretty much just take any midfield team, roll the dice, and they're going to be on top at this point. So I'm going to say a very good result for Isaac Hadjar. We're talking like P4, P5, something really, really good for VCarb.
Wow. Okay, that's very
Yeah,
bold.
well, yeah. There's always one. So
Yeah, there's always one, and you've certainly rolled the dice with Isaac Hadjar. Um, you know how you mentioned about being a betting man in safety cars. One of my star predictions is actually a safety car. I'm sticking with that. I think that rain might fall in Canada, Montreal heavens might open, and we'll probably see a few cars skidding off if the rain does come out. And then my other star prediction, I've gone with McLaren 1-2. I see them being the dominant force around Montreal. And that kind of replicates in my qualified and race predictions, which I'll get into now. I'll do both. I'll rally through with him, and then Brad can do his before we end off the episode on Formula 2 and Formula 3. So in qualifying, I've gone with Norris and Norris qualifying on pole over Piastri, Leclerc in third with Verstappen and Hamilton in fourth and fifth. In the race, I've gone roles reverse for the two McLarens. I've gone Piastri beating off Lando Norris, with Verstappen stepping on the podium, Leclerc dropping down to fourth, and Russell claiming P5.
so for me, it's the top three are kind of pretty much nailed on. It's just a case of what order. So if for qualifying, I've got Verstappen pole position. I think he might just be able to pull it out with then uh, Piastri in second and Norris in third. Fourth and fifth, that's got to go to, I'm going to say Russell in fourth and then Leclerc fifth. Race wise, kind of the same. But I think Piastri will pull it out in the end for another race victory. And then I've got Norris in second, Verstappen third, and then I've got Leclerc fourth and Hamilton fifth.
Okay, let's round off the episode with a bit of Formula 2 and Formula 3 action. Let's start with Formula 2, the happenings of Barcelona. So in qualifying, it was Arvid Lindblad that got himself pole position. Fun fact, actually, Red Bull applied for his super license and it got accepted. So Arvid Lindblad can appear in FP1 sessions with the FIA's discretion now, even though he's not 18. It was Sebastian Montoya that qualified second with Koshmani in third. Roman Stanek and Alex Dunn in fourth and fifth, with Shaw, Crawford, Browning, Joshua Dirksen, and Leo Fornaroli rounding off the top 10. In the sprint race, it was Richard Vishaw that got the race victory after starting in P5. Alex Dunn, after his penalty that carried over from Monaco and a penalty that he got himself in practice in Barcelona, started 19th but finished second. Rafa Villa-Gomez one-upped the Irishman. He started P22 and finished in third, with Jack Crawford started in fourth and finishing fourth, Montoya in fifth, Martins in sixth, Browning seventh, and Fornaroli rounding off the points finishes in the sprint race. In the feature race, you know what? It was sort of Arvid Lindblad domination. He started first and finished first, with Montoya starting second and finishing second, and the Shaw getting another podium after starting fifth and finishing third. Crawford made his way up to fourth from sixth. Dunn finished fifth after starting eighth. It was Pepe Marti who finished sixth. Kushmani dropped 4 places to finish seventh. Martins made up a few places to finish eighth. Returner Miata in ninth, and Gabriele Maini to finish in 10th. For the Formula 2 standings, Alex Dunn moves up into the championship lead once again. He's on 87 points after a 20-point swing in his favour. after the round in Barcelona. It was Richard Verschoor. After 2 podiums, he made up 2 places. He's on 84 points, 3 points behind Alex Dunn in second. Arvid Lindblad made 3 places after gaining 28 points. He's on 79 points for the current standings. Jack Crawford is in 4th. He's made up 1 place. He's on 73 points, similarly to Luke Browning, who drops down from the championship lead, and he's now in 5th. Leo Fornaroli drops 3 places. He's on 66 points. Pepe Marti gains a few points. He's in 7th. Victor Martin's in 8th. Sebastian Montoya makes his way into the top 10 for the first time this season. He gained 18 points around Barcelona. He's now in 9th on 36 points. And Dino Beganovic, after 0 points, he's down now in 10th. Brad, I need a bit of a breather. Did you catch much of the Formula 2 action? What are you finding of the drivers of tomorrow? Arvid Lindblad looks very good. Richard Verschoor, obviously the old fox in the young pack, he looks also very good. But the McLaren Junior of Alex Dunn is currently out on top.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on, especially with those top 3. Verschoor is maybe obviously the one I cast a bit of a question mark over because he's obviously been in F2 for so long. But Arvid Lindblad, surely, obviously, if he keeps this performance up, surely he's nailed on for some kind of Red Bull appearance, whether that's, in like a V-carb, that kind of thing next year. A few FP1 sessions, definitely, that kind of thing. Alex Dunn, again, I really hope he does get the seat somewhere, and he's not just a case of like another F2 champion that misses out on an F1 drive or something like that. So he seems, he's had some very good performances, so I really hope there is something that his future is a lot brighter than it is for some of the previous F2 champions.
And on to Formula 3. In qualifying, Rafa Camara, another pole position, the quickest driver to get 4 pole positions. And I think the first ever driver to actually clinch 4 pole positions in the Formula 3. He qualified on pole for the feature race with Nikola Tsolov in second, Lawrence Van Hoopen in third, Teofil Neal. He's made a forward step around Barcelona. I've not seen him inside the top 10 in a while. He qualified 4th. Santiago Ramos, last season's, kind of rear gunner for the championship. He qualified 5th. Alessandro Gusti in 6th. Ivan Dominguez, the Portuguese driver, he qualified 7th. Noah Stromstead in 8th, Tuka Tappen in 9th, Tim Tramnitz in 10th, Martinez Stenshorner in 11th, and James Wharton in 12th. And it was actually Dominguez who started in 6th in the sprint race, but he was able to get on the top step of the podium, his first ever F3 points, and his first ever win, and his first ever podium. He finished first ahead of Santiago Ramos and Nikola Tsolov in 2nd and 3rd. Van Hoopen finished 4th. Neal in 5th, Gusti in 6th, Mari Boya in 7th, Wharton in 8th, Tassanapol Intrapuvasak in 9th, and Noel Leon in 10th. For the feature race, it was straightforward for Camara. Another race victory and another points haul to add on to his already impressive championship lead. He finished first after starting on pole position. Neal in 2nd, and Gusti finished on the bottom step of the podium in 3rd. Van Hoopen in 4th. Tsolov dropped to 5th after starting 2nd. Dominguez up 1 place. He finished in 6th. Tramnitz was able to finish in 7th. Stromstead kept his place in 8th. Stenshorner went up 1 place in 9th. And it was actually Wharton that finished in 10th, but a penalty saw Callum Voisin move into the top 10 and finish in his place inside the top 10. So for the Formula 3 standings, nothing changes at the top. Rafa Camara is still out in front. The Ferrari Academy driver is on 105 points. He's well in the lead ahead of Nikola Tsolov in 2nd and Tim Tramnitz in 3rd. Noah Stromstead in 4th, Tuka Tappinen in 5th, Santiago Ramos, Alessandro Gusti, Teofil Neal, Callum Voisin and Roman Belinsky rounded off the top 10. Rafa Camara, Brad, it seems to be, the Rafa camera show at the moment in Formula 3. The Trident driver just seems to be like an indestructible man. He just seems to be going through brick wall after brick wall, just not being phased at all. Monaco was sort of an off race for him, I suppose, an off weekend for the Ferrari Academy driver. But he's picked up some very valuable points in the championship, 10 more points for Nikola Tolov across the Barcelona weekend, and he's extended his championship lead once again.
Yeah, it really seems like Ferrari have got themselves a little bit of a superstar in Kamara, especially if he keeps up those performances in F3 and then obviously in coming series. It really is, isn't it? I mean, everyone's obviously allowed a little bit of a joker or a mulligan. So we won't hold Monaco against him if he keeps these performances up. But it's really pretty sort of obviously there's him and then there's the rest. It really just seems like the Kamara show at the minute.
And that rounds off episode 19 of On the Grid Podcast, season 5. That's the Spanish Grand Prix review ticked off. That's the Canadian Grand Prix preview ticked off. We'll be back next week reviewing the Canadian Grand Prix and all the other news that surrounds Formula One. Thank you, Brad, for joining me on this episode. Like I mentioned, we'll be back next week. Thank you for listening. See you next week. Have a good Canadian Grand Prix race weekend. Hopefully we see some very good action around Montreal. We'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.